Hi there. Welcome to Good Night Gators, Week 2. Today I'm going to read to you Arnie the Doughnut, and it says down over here, Cooked Up by Laurie Keller. Laurie Keller is the author, but she made a joke saying that Arnie was cooked up by her because he's a donut. So, just got this book in the library. Pretty excited about it. Arnie turned out to be just the kind of donut he'd hoped he'd be. Chocolate covered with bright colored candy and sprinkles. Look at all my sprinkles. There must be a million of them. Actually, there are only 135 sprinkles, but I'm not going to spoil it for him. He was made very early in the morning at the downtown bakery, home of the best donuts around. Arnie was proud to be one of the best. He knew that people all over town made special trips to his bakery to buy donuts of their very own. As Arnie sat on the tray, which had just been placed in the donut case, he took a moment to reflect on the amazing things that had happened to him that morning. First, he was cut into a ring. Then he was deep fried. Then he was cooled, iced, sprinkled, and named. It says here, whatever I'm named, I'm going to go by Cool Ice D. That's what one donut said. But Arnie's name was Arnie. Arnie looked around and saw all sorts of donuts sitting around. There were curlers, French curlers. There were powdered donuts. There were long johns and cinnamon twists, donut holes, and jelly-filled and chocolate zebra and double-checked eclairs, plain donuts, cream-filled donuts, apple fritters, various muffins. He tried to strike up a conversation with an apple fritter on the next tray over, but she didn't seem to want to talk. How about that deep fryer? Any relation to Larry Fritter? Want to count my sprinkles? It's rather early. Maybe she's not a morning donut, Arnie supposed. Over here, he says, okay, that's how I get around, because he's round. It was 6 a.m. and the baker had just hung the open sign in the window. Arnie was fascinated as he watched customers stream into the bakery. One by one, the donuts were chosen, placed in a paper bag, whisked away with some of their owners. Some went by the dozen in giant boxes. Goodbye, Arnie yelled to each donut. Have a great trip. Number 105. Look, Grandma, this donut matches your dress. This is so exciting, Arnie said. I wonder who will choose me. Just then, Arnie looked up and saw a man pointing at him. Moi? Moi is the French word for me, he learned. Before he could say another word, he was pulled from the tray, placed in a paper bag of his very own. The baker says, Thank you, Mr. Bing. Have a great day. Arnie heard the baker say to the man, Mr. Bing. That's a fine name, Arnie thought. I can hardly wait to meet him. Goodbye, Arnie. The ride to Mr. Bing's apartment was a little bit bumpy. Arnie was grateful for the soft napkin that the baker had put so thoughtfully underneath him in the bag. He had never ridden in a car before, and he wished he could look out the window to see all the sights. But more than anything, he wished he could meet Mr. Bing. Why does he keep me in this bag, Arnie wondered. Finally, the car came to a stop, and they were home. Mr. Bing carefully removed Arnie from the paper bag and placed him on a clean, shiny plate. What a handsome plate, Arnie said to himself. I'm not crazy about the design. I prefer a more modern look, but nothing a little paint can't fix. Mr. Bing gently lifted Arnie from his plate. Isn't that cute? Thought Arnie as he closed his eyes. He wants to hold me. As Arnie relaxed in Mr. Bing's hand, he felt himself moving higher and higher away from his plate. When he opened his eyes to see where he was going, he discovered that he was headed right for Mr. Bing's open mouth. What are you doing? Shouted Arnie. Mr. Bing was stunned. He dropped Arnie back onto the plate. I was going to eat you, he replied in shock. Eat me, Arnie shrieked. His sprinkles were flying everywhere. Why would you do a thing like that? Do you make it a habit of eating all of your house guests? No, of course not. So then why did it suddenly occur to you to eat me? Arnie demanded. Well, because you're a donut? And that's what donuts are for, to eat? Do you mean to tell me you've done this before? Yes, I eat a donut every day, Mr. Bing said sheepishly. Arnie froze. He felt sick. He felt frightened. He felt angry. I better get out of here before this guy tries to eat me again. Well, that explains why all of my friends never write or call. They've probably all been eaten. He thought to himself for a moment, I must put a stop to this right away. I'll call the bakery and warn the others, whoever's left, that is. Arnie knew that there was no time to waste and that he needed to be very sneaky in order to keep his plan from Mr. Bing. He turned to Mr. Bing and said in his sweetest voice, Excuse me, sir, but I don't believe we've been properly introduced. My name is Arnie. Hello, Arnie, Mr. Bing stammered. I'm Mr. Bing. It's nice to meet you. Mr. Bing, would you be a dear and allow me to use your telephone? Asked Arnie, extra polite. Okay, said Mr. Bing, and he handed Arnie the telephone. As quick as he could, Arnie dialed the number for the bakery. The baker answered. Arnie, downtown bakery, home of the best. Mr. Bakerman, Arnie frantically whispered. This is Arnie the Doughnut. Do you remember me? You made me at 5:15 this morning, and I was bought about 20 minutes ago by a man who goes by the name of Mr. Bing. Yes, Arnie, the baker answered. What can I do for you? Now, I don't want to alarm you, but just moments ago that man tried to eat me. And not only that, he claims to have eaten hundreds of us. I want to make a run for it, but I wanted to warn you so that if you see him coming to the bakery again, you can stop him. Oh my, Arnie, I thought you understood. That's why I make donuts, for people to eat. I can't believe it, Arnie gasped. Are the other donuts aware of this arrangement? Well, I think so, the baker said. Let me ask them to make sure. The baker yelled to the other donuts, Do you donuts know that you're going to be eaten? Yes, we know, the donuts shouted back. We're delicious. Did you hear that, Arnie? The baker said. Arnie was crushed. The phone dropped from his head. He'd heard all that he could hear, that he needed to hear. Arnie forgot about his plan to escape. He collapsed back onto his plate and glanced up at Mr. Bing and muttered, All right then, let's get it over with. Go ahead and eat me. Mr. Bing gazed down at Arnie. I'm not going to eat you, Arnie, he said reassuringly. It just wouldn't feel right. I wouldn't feel right about it now. Really? Said Arnie, with a huge sigh of relief. Well, I'm glad to see that you've come to your senses. But since I'm not going to eat you, Mr. Bing continued, I'll have to figure out something else to do with you. I paid good money for you, and I don't want to be wasteful. Of course not, Arnie agreed. What we need to do is each make a list of things I can do with you instead of eating you. Between the two of us, we'll come up with something. Good plan, Mr. Bing, Arnie said. This will be a breeze, and I bet I'm good at lots of stuff. They both wrote down their ideas. When they were finished, Mr. Bing asked, Would you like to read yours first? Sure thing, Mr. Bing, Arnie answered. Things Mr. Bing can do with me instead of eating me. Here's a list of 6 different things. Do you need a ballroom dance partner? Nope, I don't dance. You could use a personal fitness trainer. Drop and give me 20. Too sweaty. How about A portrait painter. Heavens no. Would you like me to entertain at your parties? I don't like throwing parties. I could be your chauffeur, but you can't see over the steering wheel. I'd make a great bodyguard. Who could protect? Who could you protect from me? A cookie? All right, Mr. Bing, let's hear what you came up with. Okie dokie, he replied. I know you'll like some of these. Things I can do with Arnie instead of eating him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 ideas. I could use him like a pincushion. Ouch! Too painful. How about a air freshener for my car? Arnie, you smell delicious. How about not? Would you like to be a picture frame? I don't imagine so. I need a new bowling ball. Well, don't look at me. You'd make a fine paperweight. Boring. What about a doorstop? Try again. There was nothing on Mr. Bing's list. They were completely out of ideas. Arnie and Mr. Bing were exhausted. They felt terribly disappointed, and after a few minutes of awkward silence, Mr. Bing finally spoke. I'm sorry, Arnie, but it's clear we don't agree on anything for you to do around here. This is difficult for me to say, but I think it would be best if you found another home. I know, said Arnie, fighting back tears. I'll just be on my way then. Is it all right if I keep the napkin to pack up all my loose sprinkles? Of course, Mr. Bing replied sadly. As soon as I get a job, I'll pay you back for the money that you spent on me. That's not necessary, Arnie. Arnie shook Mr. Bing's hand and thanked him for the kindness. Mr. Bing opened the door, and as Arnie left, he paused and said, I guess donuts are really only good for one thing, eating, aren't they? They both waved goodbye, and Arnie was gone. Mr. Bing stood at the window and watched Arnie walk away. He walked past the flower beds, the mailboxes, the apartment manager's office. He passed the tennis court, the swimming pool, and the clubhouse. But when Arnie reached the "No dogs allowed" sign at the end of the street, Mr. Bing came up with a new idea. Here he says, remember how happy I was at the beginning of the story? Arnie, wait up, yelled Mr. Bing as he ran after him. Arnie turned back and stopped. When Mr. Bing caught up with him, he was out of breath. I can't believe I didn't think of this earlier, Mr. Bing panted. Arnie, I've always wanted a dog. That sign? I've always wanted a dog and could never have one because they're not allowed here. But there's no sign that says no donuts allowed. Arnie perked up when he realized what Mr. Bing was thinking. Would you like to take walks and play fetch? Mr. Bing asked excitedly. You bet I would. Can you do tricks like rolling over? Rolling over? Look at me. I was made for rolling over. Well, then there's only one thing left to ask. Arnie, will you be my donut dog? Oh, Mr. Bing, I would love to be your donut dog. It's a wacky idea, but it just might work. From that moment on, Arnie and Mr. Bing were inseparable. Arnie liked being a donut dog even better than he liked being a donut. Get it, Arnie? They're playing fetch. Over here, they're coming from the pet grooming. Bye, Arnie. Bye, Mr. Bing. I got the deluxe package. Here they are playing catch. He went through a short phase of chewing on the furniture and barking at the mailman. But after a crash course in obedience school, he graduated first in his class. There he is. No, Arnie. Arf, 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 barking at the mailman. Here he's graduating. Is that a donut dog? Oh, you're so sticky. Yes, you are. I love that Arnie got a napkin. Everywhere the two of them went, people would stop to pet Arnie. No one had ever seen a donut dog before. What a darling man. What a darling dog. Arnie and Mr. Bing had so much fun together. Arnie was the best pet that Mr. Bing could ever have hoped for, and Mr. Bing was Arnie's best friend. And here instead of a beware of dog sign, he added in the letters to write beware of donut sign. And that's the end. Arnie the Doughnut, cooked up by Laurie Keller. Now, if you like that story, I've got two more here, sequels. The Adventures of Arnie the Doughnut, Spinny Icky Showdown by Laurie Keller, and The Adventures of Arnie the Doughnut, Invasion of the Euphonauts, also by Laurie Keller. All right, boys and girls, good night. See you tomorrow.